Buckle up for another episode of Ghost Facers, a supernatural rewatch podcast. My name is Richard, and sitting shotgun, as always, is my brother in podcasting, Bree.
Hey.
Hey, yeah, let's both just do this for this episode.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, this is going to hurt my throat at any
I'm
point.
trying to be more like you. Trying to assume your role.
Oh my god, I didn't realize sound so cool.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, just step over that. It's my pile of goop skin.
So much goop skin in this episode.
Oh, yeah. So much goop in this podcast studio.
Ghost Facers! We're facing ghosts! We're others, we're not! We're ghosts! Ghost Facers! Stay in the kitchen when the kitchen gets hot! Ghost Facers! We're facing nightmare! We're facing dread! Ghost Facers!
Welcome to Ghost Facers. Today we're discussing episode number 6, Skin.
Skin.
I'm getting my skivvies.
Which, it's funny that we're trying to play it off like it's sexy because this
It
is
is
definitely
not.
a gross episode.
Yeah, well, except for that you do get to see a shirtless Dean.
That's true.
Yeah.
Never mind, I take it back.
Yeah, it's the sexiest episode yet.
I'm in, baby.
Yeah, that's right. This episode aired on October 18th, 2005, was written by John Shiban and directed by Robert Duncan McNeil, who you may know as Lieutenant Tom Paris
Oh, hell yeah.
from Star Trek Voyager.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was wondering if you'd know who that is.
Oh, I'm aware. Because he kind of had like a sort of Frakes thing where he
Yeah.
became more and more of a director, and he's worked so much like as a director in TV
But
and stuff.
he also still acts a ton. Like, he does just as much directing as he does acting. It's kind of crazy.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
See, I don't know that I've seen really him act in anything other than Voyager, but I did know that he does a bunch of directing.
It's kind of crazy. Yeah, he does a lot of sort of like pop in directing for stuff. Like it's rare that he's ever in anything like directing anything that like is constantly that he's constantly directing. Like the most notable credit is probably Girlfriend's Guide to Divorce, that he's done the most episodes, which I don't really know what that is. But he directed A Million Little Things. He directed Suits. He's genuinely one of those like pop in for an episode on a continuing series.
Which I think is true for a lot of TV directors. If you aren't also like the showrunner or a creator or a producer or something like that, I think that's generally true, that you sort of cycle.
Oh, I guess he
through.
did sort of drop out of acting. He hasn't acted since Chuck, which ended in 2012. So
wow, yeah, okay.
yeah, I guess he hasn't directed in a while. But he is a voice on the Star Trek Online video game.
Oh, of course.
Yeah. Of course, he's Tom Paris in that.
And he's also a podcaster now, because him and Garrett Wang, who played Harry Kim, they host Delta Flyers, which is the Voyager rewatch podcast.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. Yes, absolutely. So yeah, pretty notable director, but not necessarily like a notable for being a director.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
But yeah, this episode was viewed by an estimated 5 million viewers. So quite a big jump down from where we were at in previous episodes. Maybe Bloody Mary didn't get the recognition it deserves.
I think that they alienated people that own mirror-based
I was
antique
waiting
shops.
for that to come out.
I think that's what happened there.
That's right. They just couldn't look at themselves any longer.
They felt for Mr. Yamashiro.
I mean, how could you not, right? It's Mirror Emporium. Mr. Yamashiro's Magic Mirror
His
Emporium.
entire livelihood.
So a fun thing that I saw for this episode specifically was this episode had some pretty fun international titles for the episode.
Okay.
In Czech, it was known as Second Skin.
Sure. Okay.
In French, it was False Brother.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Ooh. I mean, you're kind of giving away the gambit.
I mean,
a little bit
100%.
with that title.
In Italian, it was Matter of Skin.
Okay. Which maybe is a phrase in Italian?
And my favorite one is in Finnish, In the Skin of the Devil.
I mean, holy shit. That's kind of overselling it.
I mean, yeah, because it literally has nothing to do with Lucifer at all.
Wow. Good lord. The Finns don't fuck around.
No, yeah, it was a pretty intense one. Some featured music from this episode. We had Iron Butterfly, Inagata Davida,
Classic.
Mommy and Daddy. Sorry, that was a private note. No, it was Mommy and Daddy, apparently. Good Deal. One that I'm sure will hit you quite hard is Filter.
Oh, yeah.
Hey Man, Nice Shot.
Nice.
A band called Free, All Right Now. And the Death Riders, Mary. And Leonard Skinner, Poison Whiskey.
Nice.
Or was it? We'll have to address that later. Yeah, this is a pretty like big episodes in regards to the type of monster that we're bringing in for the first time.
It's definitely like one of the more recurring of the monsters.
For sure. They definitely had a thing for shifters at one point. Like someone came up with that and they were
I think it's been a
oh yeah.
Yeah. It's true. I think there was a period of time there where Shifter was probably up like top 5 most recurring monster.
I mean, next to we'll address it eventually. I mean, no big surprise vampires show up.
Of course.
But vampires show up a lot, and I think next to that is maybe these. Like it's like demons and vampires.
And werewolves.
Yeah, but
yeah.
But it's part of the big sort of top 10 monsters, which is kind of crazy. Then they show up like 4 or 5 times, I think.
I would say so.
In the series.
Pretty impressive because the show does try its best to cycle through some new monsters, even in later seasons.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, without a doubt. So the TV guide description for this episode is the brothers hunt a shapeshifter, a creature that can transform into other people after it takes the form of one of Sam's old college friends and frames him for murdering his girlfriend. Wow. So we're getting a little bit of Sam's history in this and what's been going on with him and a connection to sort of that other life. And so how do they address the sort of combining of these worlds? Yeah. This is sort of a nice sort of like mid of the season episode that's just going to sort of give you a good monster of the week and bring in some new concepts and things like that. But the idea of a shapeshifter is kind of a cool one, and it brings in a whole slew of problems that you can imagine, which they definitely address. But before we get into today's episodes, let's open up Dad's journal and learn some of the real-world lore about today's monster.
That's right. Let's see what the lore says about shapeshifters. So, kind of funny that shapeshifters, the way we see them in this show and the way that we kind of know them from like modern sci-fi or comics or wherever we might know them, is really quite far apart from shapeshifters in mythology.
Oh, really?
Legends. In most mythology, there are creatures that are capable of changing form, like werewolves, vampires, or demigods like Loki or things like that.
Yeah, definitely.
But most examples involve either magic or using glamours to cast the illusion of looking different, or it's almost all shapeshifting between a human form and an animal form. There's very little lore.
Animorphs?
I mean, yeah, basically. But there's very little like real world myth and legend about human to human shapeshifting.
Oh, really?
Which is sort of,
maybe that's why they used it so much, because they were like, oh, this is something
which is sort of funny. I mean, human to human shapeshifting is just a thing we think about now. I mean, like Mystique from the X-Men, like that as a superpower, if we're talking about superheroes or stuff like that, that's just like in our consciousness. But when you look back at mythology in that, it's, you get Circe turning like Odysseus's crew into pigs, or you get Zeus taking the form of a swan, or an Armenian one called a Nang, which is a serpent that can become human, or there's Mestaclocan, which is a Mayan one that can transform into and control animals, basically.
Wow.
Human to human shapeshifting, the only example that I found was a Celtic myth with names I can't pronounce, but let's say it's Powell and Erin, and they could transform into each other, and they basically swapped lives for a year. That is,
and they were. And the reality was they were just twins.
In a it was like the Prestige, like Christian Bale of the Prestige.
Yeah. It's just twins.
Spoiler alert for the Prestige.
Yeah. Oh my God. What a jerk. You should have warned people before that. No. It's just it was so far long ago that they just had never encountered twins.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
they must be shapeshifters.
But like, honestly, like I did.
Wow.
As much research as, like I wasn't like riding to Minas Tirith and like looking through scrolls, but like,
wow, I thought you were really the Sam. I guess not.
No, I'm sort of half-assing it. I'm more of a Dean.
No one thinks that.
Fine. So now I'm the Sam, and I don't have the hair.
Hey, you're a Sam, but you're not even a good Sam.
Oh no! I think we're done here. But most versions, it's about either animals transforming into humans or humans transforming into animals, or you're just casting the illusion that you've changed shape. You're not actually changing your form. What we're talking about with this human to human shape shifting is like really kind of like a metamorphosis. Like we're talking like
it's like you're a were person.
Kind of.
Yeah.
You're talking about like almost like a cocoon-y kind of thing, right? So I started looking at metamorphosis. So that's a biological process where an animal physically develops. This is after birth, and it involves what they call conspicuous and relatively abrupt change in the animal's body structure.
I mean, speaking of afterbirth, that's what we're about to look at in this episode.
Well, that's true. There's a lot of that. And part of the thing with metamorphosis is you really can't have more mass going out than coming in.
Oh.
So there's something kind of interesting with the way they portray a shapeshifter in this episode, which is there is like a discarding of things, but
disgusting.
But they must also be taking in mass, either from feeding or whatever, to be able to change.
Yeah, for sure.
If they're discarding the gross
what's
skin stuff,
where's the rest of it coming from?
Where's
right?
the rest coming from? Exactly.
Unless they have like a mass growth that can happen in their body that is actually like developing naturally.
Could be, but the energy's still got to come from somewhere.
Yeah,
I
guess
find
that's true.
A reference to a thing called the Capgras delusion, which is it's named for a French psychiatrist, and it's a psychiatric disorder in which a person holds a delusion that a friend, spouse, parent, or other close family member has been replaced by an identical imposter.
Oh wow!
It's classified as a delusional misidentification syndrome, or
so they think.
It can be acute or transient or chronic. But yeah, basically, it makes people suspicious that like other individuals close to them in their lives have been replaced with an imposter,
unless they're just a shifter.
Well, that's just that.
I mean, we've investigated for less.
There's only. You're right. Let's ride. But yeah, really, like I said, other than comics and modern sci-fi, there are very few / next to no versions of just a shapeshifter that just keeps assuming different human forms.
Wow. That's crazy.
Yeah, it's kind of wild, actually. It's not what I was expecting.
Good for them for sort of creating something a bit new.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially the way that they do it.
Well, yeah. Again, super gross.
And terrifying.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, speaking of that, why don't we get into today's episode?
Let's do it.
Of course, we're starting 22 years ago.
Yeah, we're still not getting the then and now thing. Is it the full first season before that?
My guess is that that would be my.
That's just not how I remembered it. But
I know,
I guess it makes.
Isn't that funny? I mean, this is really just sort of the shell of the show. It's sort of giving you just the foundation so that you can sort of become what the show.
Not much then and nowing to do.
Yeah, well,
they are technically doing it here. But,
it's just all you need to know is what the premise of the show is. That's
It might be smarter if more shows did that. Be like, listen, it's the first season. Here's what you're getting into.
Well, exactly, right? This is one of the most powerful beginnings, I think, of an episode. I mean, this one, it's so intense. It's so, like, scary and aggressive. It's probably the scariest intro I've seen.
Yeah, this sort of, like, intense sort of hostage situation. And then you got, like, the SWAT team showing up outside. They're moving in. There's this a woman is being bound. The guy inside's got a knife. It's all very shadowy. It's super well shot.
Yeah, SWAT members basically enter into this house while if you're watching the actual original version, the In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida is playing, which is actually an homage to the 1986 movie Manhunter, where the exact scenario was first seen. A Good Deal by Mommy and Daddy has replaced In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida by Iron Butterfly for the streaming version, but it's still pretty intense. But yeah, they love doing these sort of homages to like classic films and things like that.
Yeah,
and, I mean, that's the thing that the show will take on forever, is sort of paying homage to other sort of pieces of media, genre sort of films and things like that. But I mean, yeah, so this SWAT team basically breaks in and is now like trying to save this woman. Clearly they knew that this was happening, and they burst into this room, and there's a man standing at the edge of a window.
Yeah, he's trying to get out. He doesn't get out.
He's holding a knife. He turns around, and who is it? It's Dean. I know. what a way to begin, right?
It's a great opening because really without
it's realistic.
Too much about a shapeshifter, if you didn't read like the TV guide thing or whatever, be like, God, maybe the woman that he was torturing is the monster. No, the cops just freed her. Like, you know, like the episode's setting you up to be like, I really don't know what is happening here. Why is Dean doing this?
Also, like, it gives sort of a nod to one of the original concepts of the show, which was that Dean everyone thought he was a serial killer too, right? So it's been super interesting. I love the Palm Pilot with the individual pen. With old tech
stylus,
alert.
Yeah.
Some great old tech alert. Sam receives an email from Becky, a friend from that he knew from Stanford, where he went to college, whose brother Zach has been arrested for murder of his girlfriend. Keen to help them out, Sam convinces Dean that they should travel to St. Louis. There's an interesting thing that happens in this first scene that kind of bothers me, that I have a hard time getting past, and it's a weird small moment, but the basic idea is that Sam is going, hey, look, this thing's happening. We need to go and we need to go and help my friend, and Dean just goes, that's like a 4-hour drive away. Like we're heading clearly somewhere else. And Sam just kind of looks at him, and then they peel out of this gas station. And I have no idea what forced them to peel out like that. The look is kind of just like, come on, man. And suddenly they like leave as if it's like life or death. And I feel like a scene was missing or something. It's a weird thing that shows up.
I'm trying to figure this out. They do talk about in this scene that like Sam never told any of his college buddies about the hunting or anything like that. No one knew about that other life that he had.
Well, exactly. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, right. Let's see.
So they're in St. Louis. Look, watch this scene. So he's
Dean
like, sorry about your buddy.
No.
It doesn't sound like our kind of problem. And he goes, it is our problem. They're my friends. And he goes, St. Louis is 400 miles. That's it. They just a weird look, and then they peel out as if it's like this huge emergency, and I don't understand why.
Yeah.
I went back like 4 times because I'm just like, what is that? Because he doesn't give a look like, oh no.
I mean, it's certainly not set up visually very well, but I think you could maybe write it off as like, this is an opportunity for Dean to figure out a little bit more about Sam.
Yeah.
Because Sam, as we know from previous episodes, is not being forthcoming about other stuff. Like last episode with Bloody Mary, we know that Sam had a secret, and he still didn't tell it to Dean at the end of the episode or whatever, right?
I know, he was being sort of like a coy cute about
maybe
it. Yeah.
Dean feels that he could learn something about Sam that way. But yeah, you're right. It's not explicit. It's not particularly set up.
No, it was just a weird thing that sort of like, there's a couple moments like that in this entire episode that sort of are weird continuity things that sort of like tilt my head a bit.
I mean, again, it could be that there was just more dialogue in that scene. They were like, we got to cut something. We can't cut the other bits because it's talking about the setup.
There's a few moments like that, which is interesting because this actually has some of the least amount of set pieces than any of the episodes we've watched so far.
True, yeah.
There's actually not that many set pieces, but so they finally arrive, and Becky explains that Zach came home to find his girlfriend, Emily, beaten to death. Becky claims that Zach was with her when Emily was killed, but the security tape shows him arriving home and around the time of her death.
Right.
So how can someone be in 2 places at once?
Right. Starting to sound more and more like a job for the boys.
Oh, yeah, that's right. But it is interesting because now we're getting sort of a piece. Another thing I don't understand is I'm like, if this is a college girl, how does she own this gigantic house?
I can't remember. Is it like her parents' place or something?
It might be, but I don't.
Stanford is not in St. Louis.
No, it's not.
So like this must be like.
I would assume, but it's also like nobody's around.
Yeah.
Like, because like he goes over there like later on in the episode, and it's like there's no, and they're having this like romantic moment with like a glass of wine, and I'm like, aren't you 21?
Yeah,
like maybe
it's that. Yeah, that's true.
20 technically, maybe. Yeah.
This is something that does come up in this episode for the first time of many times. Is not only impersonating law enforcement, but Dean is specifically said to be a cop. And Dean,
where he is a cop
and who he is, and that like is a big part of this episode.
I mean, identity and period
yes.
is a big piece of this episode. Whether it's like pretending to be somebody or pretending to be or becoming somebody else.
Sam obviously is lying here because he says Dean's a cop. He's not saying, "Well, me and my brother like hunt monsters." I think we can explain the being in 2 places at once thing. Yeah.
Which is, I mean, it's interesting, right? Like, I think that They play with this concept throughout the entire thing.
Yeah.
So they arrive. Now they're going to Zach's house.
Right, they're gonna investigate the crime scene.
Yeah, investigate the crime scene and try to figure it out. With Dean claiming that he is a police detective, Sam gets Becky to take them.
I love that line where he says, "Yeah, I'm an officer of the law." He's like so wooden about it.
So they enter the house and are there's sort of blood kind of everywhere, and Sam's like, "Look, you don't gotta come in here," and she decides that she's still like it's important for her to help.
Yeah.
So she comes in there, and it looks like there was a serious struggle.
Yeah, it's pretty brutal. There's lots of those like little evidence tags. There's at least 10 pieces of evidence.
Yeah.
As you can see from the numbers on the
yes. The only clues that they can find is that the house was robbed about a week before the murder, and that the dog next door has become vicious since the attack.
One, they said that there was not forced entry, like the attacker was let in.
That's right. Yeah.
Or something like that. Yeah. So they're doing their like base level detective work, which is like, is there anyone that would want to hurt this person? Like would Zach do this? Blah 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 blah. They got to whittle things down here, right? They know it's a little bit weird, but they still got to make sure it's not just run of the mill murder.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, they basically they find out that the dog was freaking out, and they're like, well, maybe dogs are connected to some like extra levels of reality and things like that. Maybe they sort of tapped into something. Dean's still pretty skeptical on the whole thing. I kind of wonder if he just doesn't want Sam around his old life for too long. That's why he's being extra sort of like...
Could be that. I think that's a reasonable like reading of it. They do say they're going to check the security tape. The security tape becomes the thing that sort of cracks this into like an actual, this is our kind of case.
Well, exactly.
Because part of what we learn in this episode is that through cameras or on security tapes, or that you can tell the difference between a human and a shifter by their eyes. Their eyes show up different, like when recorded.
This is the thing that will come up in sort of future episodes
and
as well.
And it's not only shifters. There's a few things that behave that. A few monsters behave.
Demons we've already seen, I think.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So this is the thing that turns this into a full on case for them.
But now we go and we a little bit before, sort of around the same scene, we get a quick shot of Zach watching sort of an apartment, and a guy kiss his wife goodbye, and then later that night the guy seemingly comes back to his house and suddenly tortures his wife. The guy comes home to find out that his wife's been tortured, and he goes to try to help her, and he realizes the person's still in the house, this doppelganger.
Yeah.
So he goes around to go look for it and gets caught off guard, and the guy knocks him out.
Yeah.
Which, not ideal.
Such an understatement. I mean, he also sees that does he see that it's him?
Yeah, he sees it's him first, which is, I think, why he doesn't do anything at first, because he's a little taken off.
Yeah, because that would throw you off your rhythm.
Yeah, exactly. So,
fun fact, the guy that we were just talking about, that's Peter Shinkoda. He played Nobu in Daredevil.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. And he's been a bit in the news lately.
Yes, unfortunately.
So the next day, it's early morning, back at Zach's house. Sam and Dean return to try to find some more clues, because he's like, well, the cops think that he was still in the house.
Yeah.
Maybe there's stuff outside. I do love this one moment, because Dean's clearly like, he's fine working late nights, but he does not like waking up early, which is the thing that shows up on the show later on too. Dean is not a morning person. So not a morning person. So he has this really fun line where he goes like, why are we here this early? And he goes, oh, because he's like, I want to see if there's any clues. And he's like, I still don't know why we're here at 5:30 in the morning. which I really love. So Sam points out that if the person they saw enter wasn't Zach, then he must have left by a back entrance to avoid being captured on the video camera. And they eventually see that there's a blood smear in the alley behind the house, which sort of supports that theory. And then they see an ambulance pass and follow it to discover that another murder has occurred.
I mean, this is the craziest part of their job, though, too, which is like just an ambulance passes them and they go like, it must be related.
I know. I'm like, what are the chances? Like,
but I mean, I guess if you're doing that kind of work, you sort of just have to
take a chance.
Just go check things out. So they're doing the same sort of thing here. They're looking at back entrances to the place and stuff like that. Or at least Sam is. Dean, I think, is still maybe slightly skeptical about this.
Also probably drinking a coffee and trying to wake up.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The Dean figures out that this is actually their kind of problem.
The dude was driving home from a trip when his wife, suddenly gets killed by him. Yeah. So, or tortured by him. So it's not possible, right? And then they're going like, well, it's the same scenario twice now, clearly.
This guy survived. So he's saying like, no, like it was a guy that looked just like me.
Yeah.
And that's always where they clue in, like, this is actually our kind of job.
Well, exactly. Right. And so they go skinwalkers, I guess, or werewolves. Like, I don't know.
Yeah. Skinwalkers, I didn't mention in the Dad's Journal thing because we can get to that in a future episode, but a Navajo skinwalker is something specific. But again, that's the human to animal transformation. They also mentioned werewolves, which is a human to animal transformation.
For sure,
This idea of just being a duplicate is different, right? The shapeshifter thing is more... it's different from those other more specific things.
So one of the things that they realized was, well, if the trail just suddenly gets cold, maybe he went down. And so they go into the sewers. Dean and Sam find another bloody trail behind the apartment out back and follow it down a manhole to the sewer.
Right.
And as they're sort of in there, they find a pile of skin and blood. They realize they're dealing with a shapeshifter. And
it is so gross.
It's the grossest thing I've ever seen on the show.
Suit. It's not dry. It's this wet,
blob,
fatty kind of. It's disgusting.
It's the grossest thing I've ever seen on the show.
I think the shapeshifter is the grossest monster on this show.
Yeah. Yeah, I 100% agree. And there's been some random shit that they've shown, but nothing has ever been that gross. So on finding the pile of skin and blood, they realize they're dealing with a shapeshifter. Suddenly the shapeshifter attacks them and runs off.
And this is like they give us the information we need to know. How do you kill a shifter?
Yeah.
Silver hurts them. So silver bullet to the heart, that'll kill them. I think you can also shoot them in the head. I think it's just silver in general is the weakness, but
it's pretty funny.
I think Sam is continuing to lie to Becky and saying like, yeah, we think we're on it, but he hasn't said like it's a straight up fucking monster.
Well, exactly, right?
He gives him a hard time about that too, about like sort of keeping those lives separate.
So after they get attacked, the boys get separated.
Yeah.
And during the pursuit, the boys get separated, and when they reunite at the car, having lost the creature, Sam suspects that Dean is actually a shapeshifter.
Right.
Which is a really interesting sort of scene, because you really start sort of understanding like how deep of a relationship do they really have. And he tests him by asking him basically like a simple question like, didn't Dad deal with a shapeshifter before?
Yeah.
And suddenly, who we saw was a shapeshifter right before that.
This is a very classic thing in most movies when dealing with like someone saying that they're someone, or like a chameleon thing, or the Mission Impossible, like Impossible Mask kind of thing, where you tell a story that is mostly true and you change one little detail to see if they catch it.
Yeah,
the detail they should catch.
And the guy does catch it, and you're going, oh, well, it's got to be Dean, right? But we just saw that the eyes changed right before this. So we're like, no, he doesn't. How does he know this information? That's really interesting. So Sam throws him the keys, and as the shapeshifter's going through their trunk and seeing all of this like weaponry. By the way, this is the first time we see the grenade launcher, which comes back in a later season.
Oh, the grenade launcher!
It becomes a big point to Dean later on in other seasons, but this is the first time we really get to see it in the trunk. Right. But the guy's realizing, oh my god, like this is awesome. He's like, I got all these sweet weapons now. And just at that moment, Sam pulls a gun on him and he goes, Dean doesn't use his
it's the handedness thing.
Yeah. He's like, you caught those keys with your left. Dean's right-handed. And he was just like, oh, he's like, you caught it with your left, and your left arm was hurt. Yeah, that's what it was. I'm not that big of a fan. I don't know what hand he actually uses.
I think we're done here.
Well, I know what he does with his left hand, but I don't necessarily know if that's his dominant hand. I mean, I'd like for him to be dominant with his right hand.
Yeah, it's just like what the episode title is. Skin. So basically Sam knows that he's a shifter, but there's just that nagging doubt, right? Because this shifter is very good at being Dean.
Yeah.
And he doesn't he doesn't kill him, and the shifter gets the upper hand and kidnaps Sam.
That's right. And takes him prisoner. Who is suddenly he finally realizes that his brother is not his brother. Funny little fact, Jensen Ackles also played the brother of another Sam in Dark Angel with Jessica Alba. Also in Dark Angel, he played two versions of himself, Ben and Alec, just like in season 1 of Supernatural.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
I was proud of that piece.
That was good.
Yeah, so Sam regains consciousness in the sewer, bound to a beam. The shapeshifter has access to Dean's memories. That's how he finds out that how he got that sort of extra piece of information.
Yeah, so the shifter doesn't only take on like your biology, he takes on your memories, which is maybe an argument that your memories are biological.
Just interesting.
That like if you can assume the exact physical form of someone, you can get what they know.
But they're also saying
but
that
it's a monster.
But
There's a certain amount of matter.
Yeah, but they also mention that the reason why he keeps people alive is because there has to be a psychic connection, and that's how he sort of downloads their memories, right?
Yeah.
So the shapeshifter has access to Dean's memory and claims that Dean is angry at Sam for having left him to go to college and for having opportunities Dean never have. And so this is where you sort of get there's a bit of resentment between the guys, even though there's this whole dad thing. There's also this sort of thing where Dean wanted to have a different life as well.
Oh man, and like this is just the first of a very, very long
strap
road
in
of this like I was jealous of you.
Yeah.
I was jealous of you.
Yeah, it's a thing that these two this is a thing with any brothers, right? Where they have you get any siblings really, you have different sort of lives and different relationships, and just based on when you were born, you sort of have a different relationship with your parents, right?
Especially because at this point in this first season, Dean is very much I was the one that stuck with Dad. Dad has a way of doing things. We do things Dad's way, which is my way. That's why I'm driving his car and blah, 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 blah. And Sam is like, I don't want Dad's way. I went to college, blah, blah, blah. And so now to start, having this shifter being like, well, no, I know your brother's memories. He doesn't want this.
Yeah.
He wanted what you had.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's starting to, open wounds and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So the creature finally leaves, telling Sam its plans to attack Becky, because like any good villain, you got to tell him what you're about to do.
A monologue.
Yeah. At her house, Becky invites the shapeshifter, who she obviously thinks is Dean, in for a beer. They talk for a while, but eventually the creature attacks her. And that's when we get the SWAT team that will eventually arrive.
Yes,
but before that
pretty much sets us up for that first
exactly. But before that, in the sewer, Sam struggles to get free and suddenly hears Dean regain consciousness. There's a really funny moment that happens here where Dean goes like, "That better be you, Sam, and not that freak of nature." And Sam goes, "Yeah, it's me. He went to Becca's looking like you." And Dean goes, "Well, he's not stupid. He picked the handsome one."
Classic
Dean line. I love that one. But together they're going to escape, get out of the situation. But we go back to go see Becky, and this is where sort of you get this interesting monologue between the shapeshifter and Becky about sort of like his pains as being a shapeshifter. And this is sort of the first time we get to see sort of the perspective of the monster.
Yeah, because she says something like who could look like someone else? Must be some sort of freak.
Yeah,
and he kind of does that like
I'm a different. I think Dean thinks that maybe the monster's not so bad. Yeah,
well, he's saying like it's evolution. It's the next stage.
Yeah, and like maybe I had to do this to adapt because nobody wanted me, right? Like you get to
you're
sort
right,
of.
Though I think this is maybe our first version of a
sympathetic monster.
Not even wholly sympathetic, but at least that they have some sort of inner life beyond just monsterizing.
Yeah, exactly. That like not only it's not just kill the monster. It's like, well, kill the monster, but also because they really did a lot of bad stuff. Yeah. But also like there's reasons behind their decisions. They're not just monsters because they were born as monsters necessarily.
Yeah,
they may have inclinations that are monsters. But I mean, this is not he's got to eat people. He's got to drink blood. Like this is somebody who's got trauma, but also happens to be a shifter. Yeah. They're not necessarily one and the same.
Yeah,
I think that's a it's about how their response to trauma is kind of maybe the thing that turns them into
his
what they are.
His perspective on it is that he's sort of like
he's a victim.
Well, but he's like a rat in a maze. He's just trying to stay one step ahead, trying to survive because he doesn't want to get hunted. He doesn't want, like all this kind of stuff, right? He starts overplaying his hand as Dean big time.
I mean, if I was in Dean's body, it's hard not to feel like you're that confident, but definitely not a good move.
Way overplays his hand.
Absolutely.
Becky knows something's up. She doesn't necessarily know what, but this is where we start setting up where we get to with that first shot of the episode. So
exactly.
Shapeshifter Dean is taking on Becky, ties her up, and then the SWAT team does show up because meanwhile, Sam and Dean...
But we do.
No, they haven't managed to escape. She manages to call the cops or something, right?
Well, I think she managed to call the cops, and we get this one moment where in the beginning we saw the sort of up to the windowsill, and you assumed like he was going to get killed or something like that, but instead he fucking like whoops ass. Throws a knife at one of the guys, like kicks another one, and then jumps out the window as bullets are sort of like following him, but don't actually hit him, and he escapes. I mean, he's also a monster, so these bullets probably wouldn't do anything because only silver bullets work here. But this is where he decides to change shape.
Yeah, we actually finally get to see the change, and it is grotesque, like bones cracking, muscles tearing. It's. Which is why I think Metamorphosis was like really more what this is than what we think of as like shape changing with animals.
It's really gross.
Teeth fall out.
It's so gross. But interesting thing, this him taking off his shirt or being shirtless was devised by Eric Kripke to meet the overwhelming number of requests he was receiving from fans for Ackles to appear with less clothes.
Yeah. And then he's like, take your clothes off and then also take your skin off.
Yeah, which is also just like, I'll give you what you want. Yeah. But
like
also the cold bath right after that.
Isn't that also like the rock DJ music video, the Robbie Williams one? Where
he's oh my God.
And he starts taking his skin off and stuff too. But basically, this ends up being like the cops saw Dean there. So now Dean, there's an APB out for Dean. He's on the news. He's wanted.
There's a funny moment where they're looking at the TVs and sort of they see a photo of him and he goes, "Man, no, it's not even a good picture." Which is a great line. And then
classic Dean.
Well, now they don't have any of their weapons, and so they're like, "Well, we just got to we just got to do this." And Dean's just ready to go right after him because he's like, first I'm going to find that handsome devil. He's like, I'm going to find that handsome devil and kick the holy crap out of him. He's like, now it's personal because he's looking like him and fucking up his life. But they're like, we got no weapons. There's nothing that we can do. And they go, oh, the car. There's a bunch of weapons in the car, which Dean goes, oh, the thought of him driving my car. And Sam's like, oh, come on. And he's like, it's killing me. And he's like, just let it go.
I will say they do have a good job of being a show that is still very much a horror show and then balancing it with some of those buddy cop kind of like the ribbing, I can get that handsome devil. Like there's a pretty good balance in these
of like comedy
episodes,
and like horror. And it's a thing I think they always keep for a lot of seasons is sort of this balance between comedy and like
any
action.
show. I do think that Supernatural sometimes loses its way that way.
Yeah.
But certainly this first season, they do a really good job of.
They understand right from the beginning that like that classic like horror, comedy, and horror together work really, really well. And Eric Kripke originally was a comedy writer. He was working on comedy shows and realized he wasn't like an incredible comedy writer,
right? And
that's why he ended up going towards horror. But it was a thing that happened. This is a part that really bugs me. There was clearly like a B story where Sam got arrested and they just got rid of it.
Yeah, because they go to try and find the car. Sam, the cops show up. Sam's
like puts his hands up
there so that the cops stay there. He lets Dean escape. Dean finds the car, gets the weapons, finds more goop in the sewer.
There was a random line where he just goes like, oh, "They can't hold me," and then suddenly he's just not in jail and he didn't go to prison anymore.
Yeah, which is like
within like less than an hour.
This is also like sunnier times where our media was like the cops will respect the rules.
Yeah. Very funny. But yeah, Dean...
They legally can't hold me. It's like, oh, I guess there's nothing we could do as cops.
Yeah. You are both male and white. We're going to just let you go.
I mean, there is that.
Yeah. So Dean returns alone to the sewer to track the creature. Yeah, see, he just like suddenly he's at this house and there's no explanation of how he got out or how very funny.
Yeah, Sam's just there with Becky.
But yeah, he returns alone to the sewer to track down the creature and finds Becky there. The creature has assumed her identity now, and you realize that the shapeshifter has tricked Sam and is holding him captive.
Yes.
And so now Dean's getting the actual Becky out.
Yes. Actual Dean is freeing actual Becky.
Yes.
This is hard to do audio.
I know, right? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Especially because we're watching it at the same time and trying
it's like the 3-card Monty thing where it's like, where is the fake one
yes.
at any given time?
But now suddenly, also another weird jump is now it's not Becky anymore. The shapeshifter's back to being Dean.
Back to being Dean again.
Suddenly had all of the clothes, too, that he was wearing.
But I think that's...
It would be funny if it was Dean, but in Becky's clothes.
The clothes thing is funny because we know that this is not like it's not like the Skrulls or something like in comics. Like, this isn't a shapeshifter that also
it's not a mirage.
or like Mystique. Or
yeah.
So it's like the shifter brought Dean's clothes, which I think makes a little bit of sense because he's already framed Dean for some murders.
Yeah.
So he might as well shift back to Dean, commit more murders, and then if anyone sees him when he's leaving, it's just building case against Dean, basically. Like, I do think there's a certain amount of logic to it.
There's another moment, too, where another weird jump where he's initially sitting up, and then the scene changes and Sam's laying down, which is weird. And then there was a knife inside of the pool table, and then they have a shot, and suddenly Sam's got the knife in his hand.
Well, he pulls it out. We see him.
Did he? I didn't see that he pulled it out.
He kicks the shifter and then he releases his.
Yeah, I see that part, but I didn't realize he pulled it out. One of the things that's interesting was I mentioned this before, but the closed captionings for this episode reveals that Poison Whiskey by Leonard Skinner was supposed to be the feature during Sam's fight with Dean / shapeshifter.
Right.
The lyrics even run in full through the captions, though a regular dramatic piece of score music is heard instead. So they changed the song at some point. Maybe they didn't have the rights for it, or they lost the rights at the last second. Who knows?
Is this our first Dean and Sam fight?
Yeah. Oh, well, I mean, technically the very first episode where Dean shows up at his apartment.
Oh, yes, that's right. Yeah, where he doesn't know it's Dean.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is one where, the shifter again has some of Dean's memories, so he's like doing the psychological warfare with Sam, being like, I always used to beat you up when we were kids and all this kind of stuff. It's
trying to become
It's
Dean,
a pretty knockdown, drag out fight, though. They take out a bookcase, they take out a pool
I know,
table,
yeah. Throw him across the room into a coffee table.
Coffee table, yeah. There's a lot of furniture breaking. It's that thing where it's like a real human can't
take that much. Yeah, absolutely.
And then the real Dean shows up and just
shoots
pumps Silver into that shifter.
Yeah, one of the things Dean loves is just shooting his gun a lot.
Yeah. And this is not the other thing with the shifter is like, does the shifter have an original state? We don't know because
we don't get
Dean
to see
kills
it.
And the shifting is such a process that there's no like, and now it's dead, it reverts to, which when you think about that must be hard to be a shifter because you're constantly absorbing and taking on other people's identities and memories. You no longer have an original form.
No,
it's like on the Flash, they've got Everyman who's a shifter. And his original form, he has no eyes and that he's almost faceless because he can't remember what he is.
It's crazy. Yeah, it's a thing that they'll address in a future season.
Then you're like, oh, that. It sucks to be that monster, and then you just end up dead in some house. I know he did bad stuff, but it's like. Fuck,
I know, what an awful way to go, right?
An awful way to live before going too, yeah.
And I wonder,
that's kind of make you feel for him a little bit.
You know what? Maybe he's not so bad.
I think that shifter had some good ideas.
Yeah. So the police decide to release Zach as now they suspect Dean Winchester, who they found dead at Becky's house, was the culprit in Emily's murder. So it's interesting. Now they've got a huge rap sheet on Dean, but they also think he's dead. Yeah.
I mean, they always roll into town and give other names anyway. They use their first names to give other last names. But it is funny that now Dean is I'm officially dead.
Yeah. But I mean, they've also had all of these sort of other crimes that they've committed that I mean, someone that looks like him, so they could have eventually figure out that he was using aliases. I mean, it's a thing that other criminals do.
Yes, yeah.
So as they leave town, Dean muses that he is missing his own funeral.
Yes, yeah.
As if like people are going to find out.
Yeah, and yeah, that's right. They wrap stuff up with Becky. We get this, again, episode ends. We got to talk at the car.
Oh yeah, I think they talk in the car too. Yeah, you get his driving around sort of scene, and Dean sort of apologizes that sort of things couldn't be different. He wished he could just like go to college, or he says Joe College, which is actually a reference to another movie. But
is it?
Yeah, I can't remember what the reference was, but.
Yeah, there's some real talk here. Sam is saying, like I didn't fit in real life too. I was clearly I was lying to everybody constantly.
Well, exactly, yeah. But yeah, so you get the brothers at the end having their heart-to-heart moment like you do in most of them.
Yeah, there it is. How many chances am I going to get to see my own funeral?
You'd be surprised. Not to spoil anything.
Pretty straightforward episode, I would say. You're right. There's not a ton of set pieces. There's not a lot of things. It's mostly just like, we got a couple of setup things. Chase the shifter. Now it's the follow the ball. Where's the ball? Catch the ball.
Yeah.
Who is the shifter? That's most of what this episode is, as opposed to like deducing what the monster is or anything like that. It's more about the suspense of at any moment when you're dropping into these scenes, especially because you cut in and out without the beginnings and endings of sort of moments. You'd be like, so did something happen in between? Who is the shifter right now?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of suspense that way. Why don't we give our sort of summation of our thoughts and rank this episode out of 5
puddles of skin,
piles of like flesh goo.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, why don't I mean, I know that you had some opinions about this the first time you watched it, which isn't too long ago.
Yeah.
And it sort of colored your thoughts on the show, I remember. So why don't you go first?
I think this is the first episode I watched that I didn't love.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think I maybe appreciate it more looking back, having watched more of the show, because it'd be like, oh yeah, I like this kind of monster and stuff like that. And there are good shifter episodes, but I don't know that this one is a good one.
Well, yeah.
I think this is the first episode where I was like, design wise, like that metamorphosis thing looks super cool. Like there's some neat effects and stuff. It's obviously hella gross, but it's still cool.
Yeah.
But story wise, there's not a ton going on. There's not like a big character moment for Sam. It's not like that all these lives with the college friends come to a head and he makes some big revelation. There's not a lot of that. I mean, it's only the 6th episode, but to sort of set that up and then it doesn't do anything. The shifter meets a pretty unceremonious end.
Though he does fly in the air.
Yeah.
From a gunshot.
Which is pretty fun. But
clearly like the stunt people on this episode were just like went buck wild.
Oh yeah, I mean, God, that Sam and Dean fight, crazy sort of.
But then like a bullet sends him literally flying in the air.
Yeah,
it's pretty awesome.
But I would say in general, like we do get a little bit to know the monster, but he's also trying to be Dean.
Yeah,
like this episode feels like it's doing half of everything.
Yeah.
Like, are we doing a big Sam character reveal thing?
Yeah.
Are we going to learn that monsters have an inner life? Or are we going to what? And it sort of half does all of, or is Dean on the run from the cops?
Yeah.
And it basically half does everything, because even when the cops show up, Sam just goes like, I'll do it. They can't hold me. And Dean just runs away. It's not like Dean gets arrested and then also has to get out to also save the day. Everything the episode does, it only kind of half does it. It's not bad, but certainly compared to the stuff that came before it, I think it's disappointing.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think for me, I'm going to give this a 3 out of 5.
Wow, okay.
Flesh goo piles.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I definitely agree with you. I think this issue suffers from being so early in this first season. I think that's one of the biggest problems for this.
This would have been a better like episode 17.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the problem with this is that as you're trying to get into this show, you're looking for more, right? You're trying to find out what's going on, what is the point, where are they going? You're searching for more. You love those sort of monsters, but you also want more information. You want more development between the two characters. You're just looking for it to grow. And this is sort of
it's too
one
early for it.
It's a one note episode.
Those reveals, you'd be like, okay, well, what's left?
Without a doubt. And I think that's one of the biggest things it suffers from here. And it also like loses a lot of opportunity, maybe for time that they spent sort of misplaced in other ways. I think that like you didn't get a fun police station scene that they clearly maybe cut out. That's what I'm guessing.
Right. Yeah.
That you lost that. There was so much of like playing two characters and having to like show the character doing things. Like it felt like a lot of repetition,
right.
And like going to the sewer and then going back to the sewer and then going to this person's house and then going back to their house. Like It was a lot of like repetition. I think that this really suffered from maybe trying to do maybe too much in too short of a period of time,
right.
and losing sort of a lot of the fun that this could have been, because you try to sort of trying to explain this entire new creature that hasn't existed, that people don't have context for.
Right.
Because future episodes, I think, of Shapeshifters are a lot better. And I think that's because you don't have to explain it anymore, right? You don't have to show the thing shifting. You don't have to...
And it's less about... The other Shifter episodes don't really put the emphasis on that psychic link. Like, again, that psychic link should be more. We should learn everything about them because of it. Like, there are episodes in the future that aren't necessarily this monster that basically execute that thing better. And
without a doubt.
I think you're right. It's because of the placement in the season, right? Like, this should be later where then that psychic link can reveal everything. And then we go, okay, now it's all out on the table.
Yeah.
You have your big fight and be like, now we got to buckle down and get to the series finale. Like,
which is why
the pace is weird for this episode because they go partway there and they go like, oh shit, it's episode 6, pull it back.
Exactly. And I think that's why I think it's better in rewatch, because you're sort of going, well, I know everything that's coming. So this is just a fun monster episode. It's just not a strong episode for like the writing, I think, or character development and things like that.
Yeah,
like
watching it fresh, it's I probably would have ranked it lower than I did.
Yeah. Oh, I bet.
If it was a first watch.
I remember you texting me about it the first time you watched it, and you were just like, meh. Like it was sort of like a womp womp.
You're definitely right. Like rewatching, I can just go like, oh, that's a fun monster.
Yeah, exactly. And there's some great action scenes. The visual effects on this were incredible. Like watching that gross like changes and stuff like that does not feel of its time. It feels like that could have happened today. Like it was very, very well done.
Yeah.
And I think that like a lot of my credit goes to that. But I think like your day players in this were really weak. I think this actress shows up as another character later on. Could have used
a lot more Peter Shinkoda and a lot less Becky.
100%.
Makes maybe less sense because Becky's supposed to be Sam's age and all that kind of stuff. But,
yeah, I get why. I just feel like it was sort of a misuse of characters because Peter Shinkoda is so good and Becky was sort of a weak day player.
And he's great in his little scene there where he sees himself and it's like, oh, I wanted more of that.
Yeah.
Especially because it doesn't go anywhere. Like we don't really need Sam's friends.
Well, that's the thing, right? And it overall sort of shows that like the backstory about Sam's past doesn't really matter. Like it doesn't matter that he misses his friends in college. Like, and I think this show is trying to figure out if the college thing was more important than it actually turned out to be. I think it's more important to talk about his family history and sort of where that came from. And I think they were trying to add on to that, going like, this college experience was so important, but it's not really. It's more about him leaving that's more important than the college experience itself.
Yeah, that's true.
And I think
you're right. Yeah.
And because you can even tell Sam doesn't really care that much about. He tried to pretend like he cares more about his friends than he actually does. I think the show sort of gives up on that at a certain point, and so I think that it was a few missteps and sort of a bad placement of this episode that made it sort of not as strong. And I think had they even just written it later in the season, they probably would have been able to do a lot more with it.
Yeah,
it was just sort of like a cool idea that they just sort of misplaced in the season.
So how many piles of flesh goop?
So I would say it's probably 3 piles of flesh goop for sure. Yeah. It accomplishes like a monster that's interesting that I want to see more from. Yeah. And I think it sort of gives some information about the Dean and Sam's relationship. Like, it's not without background episodes, because I think that's one of the things that the show always needs to be constantly doing is continue to develop them as characters one way or another.
Right.
And this does do that slightly.
Yes.
And so I think that that's why it's sort of right in the middle. It's 3. It's fine, and it's not bad.
Yeah.
There's maybe bad episodes that will come eventually, but this is not bad. It's just sort of a misstep, but not like unwatchable.
Right. Yeah, I agree.
All right. That is it for this week. So if you have any notes about this or maybe a future episode, or you just want to say hi, you can send us an email at
ghostfacerspodcast@gmail.com.
That's right. All right.
And hit us up on Twitter at ghostfacerspod.
That's right. Heck yeah. Say goodbye, jerk. Or bitch. Yeah, that's say goodbye, bitch.
Jerk.
This was a Brain Freeze podcast.